There is no free agency as we know it in the NHL. The new free agency is the trade market. If teams sense that a player is considering leaving, a la a star player in the Brady Tkachuk mold, with even multiple years left on their deal, they have to be looking at the best thing for their franchise and their future if it's contention, if it's rebuilding, as opposed to holding on to said player, running out their contract. There's less and less of an appetite for that. There's more of an appetite for sign-in trades, like a Darren Radish, for example. Teams have now an expanded capacity to retain players with the rising cap world. The Flyers, if they are to make a leap, to take a meaningful step this offseason as far as acquisition, it's not going to be via the 21st pick. It's not going to be via free agency. It has to be via trade. I know people talk about restricted free agency, but even in the RFA world, your top dogs, your centers, your pillars, blue chippers of the world, like a Leo Carlson, Connor Bedard, etc., they're going to be matched wherever a team might be poking, whether it's Philly or who knows. What I do know is Zach Werenski, his name is just floating and floating and floating. Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts. Frank Saravalli talking about not just Zach Werenski in Columbus, but focusing on the reigning Norris winner. Zach Werenski, I mean, he is an absolute game breaker. You talk about a left shot, 6'2", 28, has 2 years left on his deal. This is similar to the Quinn Hughes situation for the Flyers. And frankly, we won't quite know how close the Flyers were, what their trade offer looked like for Quinn Hughes, what was maybe the ask from Vancouver. But if you're the Flyers, if you're Danny Briere, if you want to announce the Danny Briere, the new era of orange, so to speak, Zach Werenski, he very well is that potential next big fish on the move from Team USA, from the gold medalists. You see an appetite for players. If they can't see the vision to win now, they want to be on the move. You can't really blame them. You talk about players in the prime of their career. The Flyers, maybe not the easiest destination to envision as far as Zach Werenski if he is moved by Columbus and Don Waddell. But you consider, if there is a manager out there who would maybe buck the trend of like, oh, we'll just send you to a Florida team. We'll just send you to Vegas. We'll send you to Minnesota. If there is a manager, it's Don Waddell. The beat of his own drum, if the Flyers are to present an attractive offer enough for Zach Werenski, I think Don Waddell, in this no-move clause era as well, where it would have to be a mutual agreement, in theory, if Werenski was to leave Columbus, but he hasn't asked out. That's the reporting. But if Columbus gets an attractive enough offer, Don Waddell goes to him and says, here's what we got, take it or leave it. And if you're the Flyers, with Zach Werenski, I'm looking at Tyson Forster, Cam York, the 21st pick this year, Toronto's pick next year, or the year after, we'll see, but certainly an attractive first-round pick in what's looking to be a stronger class than this year. I know that's the narrative pretty much year-round. Well, you think this year's good, wait till you see next draft class. But that truly is what people start to envision next year when you think about DuPont, Carter Meyer, Alexei Joseph, Privalov, the Russian. There's a lot of talent in that next year's draft class, so this Leafs pick could hold a lot of value. So you look at two players roster-wise. You look at 2 first-round picks. That's a total equivalent of 4+ first-rounders for Zach Werenski. And, of course, you get him in the building here, and you have confidence that you could sign him long-term, which could start as soon as next offseason, as far as an extension goes with Zach Werenski. Where maybe it's a max set. Well, it would have to be, you would think, a max 7 years. So effectively, if things go right, almost a decade worth of Zach Werenski, a guy who just produces points, who completely reshapes any blue line he walks into. The bottom line is, does Columbus like Tyson Forster? Do they like a Cam York? I would also, of course, be willing, if Owen Tippett is someone that they like, although Owen Tippett does have what's rumored to be a 10-team no list as far as any potential trade, so he would potentially need to sign off on a Columbus deal, you would think. But Owen Tippett / Tyson Forster plus a young defenseman in the younger defenseman, I guess, someone who's entering their prime in Cam York, plus a couple first-round picks. That's the type of appetite I think the Flyers might have in acquiring a Zach Werenski if he is to be moved. Another one of his teammates, though, who is rumored to be maybe not on the move, but heavily taking calls on, receiving calls, is Kirill Marchenko. Kirill Marchenko, he's a winger. So does it really make sense? How does he figure into the mix here for the Flyers? In any deal, it would have to be some type of wing goes out, in comes Kirill Marchenko. And you think about the aforementioned Tippett, Forster, it would have to seemingly be one of those two in any deal. The minutia around potentially picks, prospects on either side, that would be to be determined. But the nuts and bolts of a deal for Kirill Marchenko would have to be, I think, Tyson Forster. The reason I say that is because the Flyers, why not keep Owen Tippett, add Marchenko, really increase your team speed, the dynamic, physical, a bigger but extremely explosive skating wing in a 6'3" Kirill Marchenko, who has been right in and around a point per game these last 2 seasons in Columbus, who has been a menace on the power play, can play left wing. We know the Flyers have quite a few options down the right with Michkov, Martone, Konechny. So as far as impact minutes, you move out a Forster, you bring in a Kirill Marchenko. That's an appetite that I would have personally. Would you guys have it? I know Tyson Forster, we love him. But think about Marchenko, he's only about a year and a half older, entering his prime. The team speed, the explosiveness, the goal-scoring ability as well. We know Forster is unbelievable, as in all situations. Not the greatest skater, but has made a bunch of strides in his young NHL career in that area. But Marchenko, it's a different beast. You look at edge, his percentiles, 99th, practically Owen Tippett level skating, which is unbelievable. So to have that type of player, I think would be a huge step the Flyers could take as they enter into another potential playoff season, win around, make some noise, be one of the top dogs in the conference. Frankly, step into that number 2 team in the Metro. We know the reigning champs. Congrats to Carolina. But a Kirill Marchenko, I am very intrigued by that possibility. Rumors are, look, they're just taking a lot of calls. Does he get moved? Doesn't seem likely. But man, talk about another Russian entering the fold as well. Could only help Michkov, be a potential line mate, stylistically. Was in the SKA St. Petersburg program. It makes too much sense to me. Does it for you? Let me know in the comments. What seems to make a lot of sense to the Flyers, maybe not as much to me, Mason McTavish. Anthony DeMarco of Daily Faceoff, who is one of the more well-plugged-in Flyers insiders, sources, he released some info on McTavish, also some Bowen Byram in there, but McTavish, the Flyers apparently among the teams keeping tabs on Mason McTavish. 23 years old, a former top 3 level pick. Another Anaheim potential reclamation project. We see how well it's gone with Drysdale, with Zegras. Who could be potentially on the move there? Cam York is the name mentioned specifically by DeMarco in his article, which I could see. Given Verbeek, given Anaheim, they're in a bit of a similar timeline. They just made the playoffs last season. they pull a bit of a stunner, beating Connor McDavid and the Oilers in that first round. They're looking to take a next step. McTavish seemingly doesn't fit with Joel Quenneville there. So could the Flyers certainly use a potential top 6 center? Absolutely. McTavish, though, has not produced to the level of a top 3 pick, to say the least. Hasn't really broken 50 plus. Can you get to 60 plus points for a guy who is not that good of a skater? He's got some size, but there's just some questions on, is it mostly situational with him in Anaheim? Or is he just not quite the player that he was thought to be as a prospect? Cam York for Mason McTavish, what do you guys think? I'm okay with it, frankly, considering the Flyers' need for center, if that were to happen. Not really interested in attaching a second-round pick, say, in a Paling type of move for Trevor Zegras last offseason. I just don't love it. But what options do the Flyers really have as far as an impact center? Which leads me. Elias Pettersson. The chances the Flyers acquire one of the more notable stories the last several seasons that across the league. What's going on in Vancouver? Pettersson, JT Miller. Tocchet, of course, being the coach in all of that mess, in that locker room chaos. Seemingly, we'll never know the full story or anything close to it. But Pettersson going over 100 points in a year with Rick Tocchet. You got to go back several seasons at this rate. But Pettersson has that $11+ million AAV tied down to a long-term contract. Look, there's not a lot of options. We talk about McTavish, and it leads me to Pettersson here. Rumors are that the Canucks are willing to retain. If they retain down to about $9 million AAV, that's, frankly, understandable for a top 6 center. Pettersson, there's a guy who you have to think a new change of scenery benefits him immensely. When you see, unlike McTavish, the demonstrated elite offensive producing season, and then you see the insane type of drop-off or stagnation, inability to get to that level, if there is a team, a situation that could potentially elevate Pettersson, you would think it would be under the coach where he experienced such progress. But is Rick Tocchet a JT Miller guy, or is he an Elias Pettersson guy? Or is that an unfair characterization, boiling it down to one versus the other? Only Rick Tocchet can tell the Flyers, can drive the Flyers' direction here